Community member to address the board with the petition Francis with regard to counselors on the campus.
I would like to start off by thanking you for taking your time to hear my concerns. I am here today to stress the need for more counselors on school campus. And when I speak of counselors, I mean people that are qualified to deal with our children's personal, social, and psychological problems. There is currently such a need for this due to bullying, children with disabilities, as well as emotional disturbance issues being punished at a higher rate than other children. There are no outlets for these children. Without enough counselors on campus, we are seeing children being placed in handcuffs for something that a hug could resolve. We have an obligation to our youth to dig beyond the surface and take a deeper look at what might define the reason for their issues and their behavior they are having. Yes, I know according to the Texas Educational Agency, the state does not have a specific requirement regarding the numbers of counselors per student. But I wish we would all take a look and collectively agree this evening there is a pressing need for more counselors. We are trying to make our campus safe and nurturing for all of our children, despite their disabilities, economical status. And in closing, I would like to leave you with this statement. A listener can help tap in to someone's wisdom just by listening. By Richard Rohr. Thank you.
Member to speak will be Shandy Chandler in regards to bullying.
Hi. According to the website www.stopbullying.gov, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services paints a bleak picture of bullying in the United States, and they cast a very wide net to define what constitutes as bullying. In 2014, the Centers for Disease Control and the Department of Education released a federal uniform definition of bullying, which ranges from mere teasing to outright physical assault. Bullying of some type exists worldwide to approximately 20 to 40% of students. In the United States, it is at 25 to 33%, as reported by the World Health Organization. Students who are perceived to be different because of disabilities or perceived differences in sexual orientation are bullied noticeably more at 55% in the U.S. Although there are currently no federal laws in the United States against bullying per se, some bullying actions can fall into criminal categories such as harassment, hazing, and assault. These are the criminal actions that I would like to discuss today. I believe that every school district has an inherent and obvious responsibility to protect the welfare and safety of students. Protection from intruders to our campuses is certainly important to prevent the possibility of harm. Even healthy air, water, and food are expected to be monitored and certified. But protecting students from bullies inside the school seems to be much less of an importance to the school system and the school board. In their student code of conduct, AISD seems to address the issue of bullying, at least on the surface. However, consistency in application of the rules is woefully lacking, giving a list of actions that may be taken on a selective basis, and communication with victims falls far short of reasonable expectations. Bullies of a violent nature who have bullied more than one person or have bullied the same person more than one time are allowed back into the same school and even the same classes with their victims, even after suspension, juvenile detention for criminal charges, and going to the school system's own reassignment facility. This happens with no prior notice to the victims or their parents, appallingly in some cases after several years' worth of documented incidents. Victims of bullying and their parents are often prevented from having access to information about decisions made and many other elements of the investigation into bullying reports because of FERPA rights to protect the privacy of the bully. Allowing criminals more rights than victims cannot possibly produce a positive outcome. The AISD policy against bullying cannot be applied unless there are independent witnesses who are willing to corroborate the story of the victim. And more than one instance of a particular activity is required for the bullying definition of AISD to be applied. Decisions seem to be arbitrarily made as to what constitutes bullying, or whether any action needs to be taken at all, even when there is obvious evidence recorded of physical violence and injury. Students who do report bullying see their reports fall on deaf ears, or reports are considered to be invalid and ignored because they were not made the same day as the offense. PSAs on national television networks tell students to stop bullying and say something, but many students are afraid of being retaliated against, bullied themselves, or they see no action being consistent to them. So they start to feel that it's a waste of time and damaging to their reputation to report the bullies. While it is the responsibility of the AISD to provide a safe atmosphere for students, that responsibility is not being met at this time, and it will not be met correctly unless and until decisive and consistent action is taken to permanently remove repeat offender violent students from the general population of nonviolent students. I ask you, how many times should a student be allowed to physically and violently assault another student before being permanently removed in order to prevent further harm to students? I propose a consistent three-strike policy. Strike one, they should be taken out of taken to the reassignment center and assigned to a different school. Strike two, if the offender remains violent at that school, then another move or permanent assignment away from typical students should be made. And strike three, continued violent bullying should result in expulsion from the district with state compensation allowed for charter schools or homeschooling. To leave violent students in regular schools is a form of violent abuse against the victim, which is ultimately sanctioned by the school board. It is time to face this issue head on and take decisive action to protect all of our students.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. The next community member to speak is Rachel Mitchell, Universal Special Needs.
So our question today is, are you listening? Do you hear our children? We do. I would like to discuss my concerns for the youth of our community, especially the disabled. My hope is to help to educate you in a way that motivates you to educate them. Martin Luther King said, education without morals is like a ship without a compass, merely wandering nowhere. So let's begin with the impact of zero tolerance on students with diagnosable mental health disorders. A report by American Psychological Association Zero Tolerance Task Force stated that students with disabilities, especially those with emotional and behavioral disorders, appear to be suspended and expelled at rates disproportionate to the representation in the population. Studies of mental health disorders in the juvenile justice system supported this position of the task force. A report of the Surgeon General found higher rates of mental disorders among the youth in our juvenile justice systems. The majority report intakes were and are from nonviolent crimes. I cannot help but feel our schools are the greatest feeders of the youth to the justice system. Since the inception of the zero tolerance policies, and children with mental and or emotional disorders are prone to have academic difficulties and sadly are less likely to succeed, especially if they're subjected to suspension and expulsion. Are you aware that 73% of the youth with serious mental disorders that did not graduate were arrested within 5 years of the time that they left our schools? They are also 3 to 5 times more likely to be in juvenile justice systems while they're in our schools. Arguably, students suffering with emotional and mental disabilities is a result of the school. They are a result of the school to prison pipeline. And it's an effect caused by the zero tolerance policies. It leads to a higher arrest rate for the population, especially this population. These children are our legacy. They are our future. They are the future of our community, of our country, and Abilene's community. So we must realize this issue and start finding solutions. Rather than worrying about cost issues such as putting more armed officers in our schools, we have to quit treating effects and start adjusting to the cause as we stand. Now, we're walking backwards. We must put in place an active commitment on our school staff to be trained to better deal with these children as opposed to sending them to alternative schools where there are no trained professionals to guide them in a positive way. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up, an advocate who, no matter who they are, will prove to them that they're worth fighting for. In my mind, there is nothing our generation should be more ashamed of than the fact that we are letting our children who are affected with mental and emotional disorders be punished for something they cannot control. It is my job and the job of every adult who comes in contact with a child to mold them and to teach them the rules and the laws of our land. Our educational system should also be required to invest in the practices that have the strongest evidence of achievement and the desired benefit of our youth. Positive reinforcement. We need multiple levels of support in our system. We also need to remember because we cannot see a disability, it does not mean it is not there. It's there. We have an obligation, to these students to see that the staff in every school has put into place procedures to help all students be successful. So let's not forget that discipline really means to teach, not to punish. A disciple is a student, not a recipient of behavioral consequences. What our students need the most is not negative consequences and zero tolerance policies. They need consistent and urgent support. They need to feel valued. They need to feel confident. We need to remember when our children fail to succeed, we have failed them because they are ours. Make our parents realize that they have a voice and they have the right to stand up and they have the option to fight for their kids. You don't have to comply. I'm going to conclude this on a quote from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And our children are people, all of them, disabled or not. Thank you. Can you hear them?
Our next member to speak is Lindsay Hallmark, of course, SROs and Rex.
I am here to touch on a couple of topics that go hand in hand. I would like to bring awareness to the need for unwavering commitment to equal opportunity for all students, and for the leadership to rethink school discipline. Far too often, school discipline is not applied equitably or effectively as it could be. A topic that also needs more light associated with school discipline is the roles of our SROs. So often, their actions are being labeled as a proper procedure, when the actual agreement between APD and AISD does not support that. It is time for accountability and change taken in these situations. Numbers of types of discrimination in school discipline is a real problem, and we must tackle these brutal truths head on. We must be careful when possibly criminalizing behavior that is not criminal in our youth. What used to be a visit to the principal's office now becomes a trip to a school officer in many cases. The problem is much more extreme in our reassignment center. We are falling short in interest and support when it is coming to our youth in need. Discipline is acceptable and expected, but redirection is key. They are being sent back to their home campuses many times worse off than they were before. We have children here being pushed deeper into the system in the name of protocol. The criminalization of children is not an effective approach to reducing these crimes. The numbers speak for themselves. The school staff must be very aware of discipline rules and the roles of our SROs. I can tell you from personal experience that they do not, and I stand firm behind that statement. I believe you state now in the current MOU these procedures clearly. So who is punished for these rules not being followed? It cannot be the children any longer. This has got to stop. Aggressive discipline and policing is stripping students from their dignity and disrupting their ability to learn. We all want safe schools for our children, but the current misguided system promotes neither safety nor learning. Despite evidence of systematic misconduct by police personnel at schools, the APD and school personnel seem to refuse to even acknowledge any problems with the school policing practices. Mostly directing this comment to the reassignment center. As a parent, I cannot accept any more inadequately trained and poorly supervised police personnel engaging in aggressive behavior towards students when no criminal activity is taking place. This plays a part in a disturbing national trend where students are funneled out of the public schools and into the juvenile and criminal justice systems. These children are often minorities, have learning disabilities, or history of poverty, abuse, or neglect, or have been stigmatized and carry a reputation grade to grade between whispers of teachers warning, this kid is bad, diminishing their chances at a fair and equal opportunity. These children are falling through the cracks, and more importantly, these children are our future. It is sad to say, but if you treat a child like a criminal, they will fulfill those expectations. Aggressive policing and discipline in public schools undermines efforts to create a nurturing and supportive environment for children. Without strict accountability and transparency, too many at-risk youth are denied an equal educational opportunity. I am now asking for a return of disciplinary decisions traditionally dealt with by the school officials to our school administrators. Mandatory training of SROs regarding and stressing conduct relating to arrests, searches, and the use of force. They must practice the rights for both the student and the parent, as well as apply common sense. Our children must be read their rights, and common sense says if they even understand what those are. In every case, before a child is questioned, the parents must be notified and let known of their rights. Also, they must be taught and held accountable for knowing the difference between the penal code and the disciplinary code when it comes to arresting students. We need a transparent mechanism for students and parents to file complaints against the APD School Safety Division and uses of all discipline, and for personnel found to have committed abuses to be removed and not allowed to conduct abuse. In conclusion, concerning the reassignment center, I will quote Ms. Jane Albright, September 23rd, 2012, in the Abilene Reporter News article on their open house event, and I quote, "The problem is we're getting kids at younger ages, and their behavior is out of control. Kids are on their own more. They don't have extended family. You don't have the Watsons anymore. You have the single mom who just got out of prison who is trying to work and raise a child who has some challenges. We have seen kids who make it. We try not to judge them. Will School Board, trying is just not enough. And yes, my child has been to the reassignment center. And for the record, I have never been to prison, and he comes from a two-parent home. I feel that statement is insulting and misleading, and it applies only to a small percentage of the children affected. It is due time for the effectiveness of the center investigated thoroughly." Thank you.
Look at him. Mm-hmm.
The next community member to speak is Shay Lewis.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to open up with a quote by Nathaniel Brandon. "The first step towards change is awareness. The second step is acceptance." Tonight, I hope to bring awareness to the MOU currently in place between Abilene ISD and APD, and the importance of revising it. It's important that first I clarify what an MOU is for those who aren't aware. An MOU is a Memorandum of Understanding. It's a formal agreement between two or more parties. MOUs establish partnerships. It's not a legal agreement, but it does carry a degree of seriousness and mutual respect, providing a mutually beneficial framework that each entity can work within to achieve shared goals. The concern this evening is what role the current MOU is playing regarding the school district and its disciplinary role. We in the community understand it is helpful to have an MOU in place. However, we feel that the community's most valuable assets, our children, are being overlooked in the current MOU. That's why it's imperative that we establish whether the MOU is just a formality or if it's expected to be abided by. It has been said in my presence, and I quote, "It's just an MOU by an SRO on the school campus," which indicates that yes, it exists, but it's nothing more than a framed picture on the wall for decorative purposes. I'm sure we wouldn't go around saying a law is just a law or a policy is just a policy. That leaves us questioning, for what reason is the MOU in place? Whom is it meant to benefit? What are the training requirements for the SRO? What are the standards for searches? What are the standards for use of force? And what are the reporting procedures? These questions come to mind because in the current MOU, it seems to give the school district employees so much room to criminalize our children, with the excuse that once the SRO gets involved, it's out of the school's jurisdiction. Despite the fact that given incidents take place on school district campus, and despite the fact that under the section regarding the cost of the SRO program, it states that the SRO will be paid by both the school district as well as the police department. We feel the school district should be able to exercise their jurisdiction on ordinary disciplinary issues. However, the MOU does not state what those ordinary disciplinary issues are considered to be. The MOU needs to include more specific information when it comes to what's considered a crime. The Student Code of Conduct states on page 11 that the school will have disciplinary authority and jurisdiction over any school-related misconduct, regardless of time or location, when criminal mischief is committed on or off school property. at a school-related event, and when the student commits a felony as provided by Education Code 37.0081. This is why we should specify, as I have seen in other MOUs, the specific crimes punishable by the SRO. These specifics need to be made clear to the educators so they are not overwhelming the SRO with issues they simply just don't want to deal with. Currently, the MOU states that the principal may, and I repeat, may, involve the SRO when there is a criminal violation. It should be more specific as to what is deemed a criminal violation, because right now behaviors such as sudden outbursts, comments like "I'm going to call my mother," and horseplay are being considered threats and criminal activities. The SRO is being called in on these issues that can clearly be handled within the school scope. Do they? Okay, sorry. Whatever happens to detention, ISS, or even suspension, does this only exist for certain students? Students who are of color, have disabilities, and come from single-parent homes or economically challenged homes are being given criminal records at rates comparable to handing out candy on Halloween. We are not opposed to the SRO program, just the opposite. We think it's a good idea to have SRO on campus with proper training and dealing with youth of all types of backgrounds and those who have mental disabilities. We would like to see school authorities step in and try to handle these situations that are within our scope before the decision is made to criminalize these children. Some children express themselves different than others, and there could be an underlying reason for this. It would be nice to see it implemented somewhere in the MOU that a first offense, not of a serious nature, warrants perhaps an SRO escort to a counselor and not a police car. We want the children to respect the uniform, not fear it. The MOU should go hand in hand with the school district rules so that there is no confusion. We need the next MOU draft to be different from what it is and different from what it would be if left alone. There is no denying that educators as well as SROs have a very challenging job ahead of them. What we all have to keep in mind are these are children that we're dealing with. So as you meet in preparation to draft a new MOU, we would ask that you keep that in mind. We all want a secure campus for the students, faculty, and staff of Abilene ISD. It is going to take teamwork from the SRO, the teachers, principals, and the school district. This is why community input on any revision that will be made is imperative, because it affects us. These are our children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews that are no longer being educated but incarcerated. The MOU is an agreement. I hope we can all agree that it's time for a change. These can't continue the way they are now. Let's all work together to restore faith in everyone, from the educators to SRO, the parents, and most importantly, the children, because they are who will serve us in the future.
Ms. Wilson. Next, we will speak with Gonzalez.
When an AISD student engages in a certain degree of misconduct, they are then transferred to either the Educational Reassignment Center or to SAC, the Student Achievement Center, both of which are located at the Jefferson campus, which houses elementary through high school students. AISD states the purpose of UNIFRAC is to provide a safe, positive learning environment with disciplinary structure and encouragement. The current culture of this facility is anything but that. Upon admission to Iraq, students as young as 6 years old are yelled at, insulted, and threatened as the parent essentially signs over their children's rights, setting the stage for their upcoming school year. At arrival, they are subject to personal searches by school resource officers or SROs, and students and teachers alike are driven by hate and anger toward each other. The student's term is often referred to as their sentence and is constantly similar to the prison term. Meanwhile, students at FAC spend the first 6 weeks facing away from peers and teachers where silence and the exclusion of social interaction are key to surviving discipline. SAC students typically serve a minimum of 1.5 years sentence before a reintroduction to society. This hostile environment is not conducive to a proper learning environment for any student of any age, sex, race, religion, disability, or sexual orientation. Students reassigned to Iraq come from circumstances of all variations and oftentimes are simply misunderstood. Many of these children have mental, emotional, and developmental disabilities that hinder their education, and even more cases have gone undiagnosed and therefore untreated. The faculty at the Jefferson Center are only required to have minimal continuing education. It is only practical to assume that an educational facility with such a highly concentrated population of mentally ill children hire faculty and staff with more than just the minimal educational and training requirements. As is, the faculty are not equipped to care for these special children who require
require more accommodations than the typical unaffected student. Psychological counselors with a proper educational background and area of expertise concurrent with the necessities of the student population at ERAC are currently non-existent. Furthermore, SROs are not currently required to have any additional training in areas of ethics or use of force and restraint techniques appropriate for children of different ages. Simply restraining an autistic child or one with attention deficit disorder can result in serious physical and emotional injury to the child, some of which can be irrevocable. Excessive use of the SRO for incidents as minor as talking back to a teacher seems to be the norm for the Jefferson campus, when ironically the role of the SRO is to ensure the safety of the campus's students and faculty. Who knew rolling their eyes at a teacher would result in serious bodily harm and could possibly land our children in the hospital? Is that not simply a child acting as a child? We insist that the Jefferson Center adopt a new mission, one that accurately demonstrates a positive learning environment with safety and encouragement. Let us create a mission of rehabilitation of these children who exhibit problems acclimating to society. Recent studies confirm the effectiveness of positive reinforcement and profoundly outweighs results displayed by physical aggression and force. Let us empower our educators to effectively educate our children and not feel forced to rely so heavily on the Abilene Police Department school resource officers. Let the SROs fulfill their roles and our children respect the badge and not fear it. An alternative to traditional discipline is the Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, or PBIS, and the Leader in Me frameworks. PBIS is a multi-tiered school-wide disciplinary system that involves a proactive approach for reinforcing positive preferred behaviors while rendering undesired behaviors irrelevant to create a positive learning environment for all students and teachers. While the Leader in Me system has already been implemented in some AISD campus curriculum, PBIS is applied to all severity of tiers, including those at the level of what we currently call DAEP, or Disciplinary Alternative Education Program, such as ERAC at the Jefferson Center. The 2010 South Dakota PBIS data report portrayed significant positive impacts. The results supported a dramatic increase in safety and communication between educators, students, and parents, and graduation rates rose by more than 50%. Most importantly, the data showed a 64% decrease in the number of students displaced due to behavioral issues.
Next community member to speak, Dixon, in regards to multiracial community alliance.
As we are here in our time of focus, we ask that in light of all this we know today, not only speak and material, but acknowledge our allegiance to your policy. We ask that you also keep in mind that we're here not only in isolation, but in together. This is why we continue to remain together, educators here together. Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Secondly, good job by those women who just spoke. I wish I had speak a bit quick. I'm here to speak about the superintendent search, and as you can see, AISD needs a leader and needs one as soon as possible. I know tonight one of the items on the regular agenda, item F, I believe, is to put together a timeline for the superintendent search. Our superintendent resigned on February the 3rd. Today is April the 13th. As I understand, there's possibly a April the 20th and April 27th special call meetings. So looking for the search firm, getting them in place, you might be able to start 3 months later. That's way too long. I don't understand what's taking so long. We're at over almost 2.5 months, and we haven't started the search process yet. We have things going on in this community that need to be addressed, and we're barely working on a timeline. I would like to encourage you to get that timeline done tonight. I would like to encourage you to make it as short as reasonably possible. I am going to congratulate you on using a firm and not doing the search on your own. The numbers that I've heard of 8 to 10 months of getting something in place is absolutely ridiculous. But in a 9-month school year, you're going to use almost 3 months before you even start the interview process. By the time May 3rd rolls around, you'll be at 3 months. And you're only going to select a firm towards the end of April. So you very well could start interviewing almost at a 3-month point of the resignation of our superintendent. That's a third of the entire school year that you have used before you even interview one person on the other night. So the sooner the better. Right now should be the time that we're looking at budgets. The one thing that the school board has done in the last several years is smooth up the budget process. The budget process usually starts March, April, May, so it's not rushed together in June, July. Well, whoever you hire as a superintendent is not going to be a part of most of that process. Yet we understand as a former school board member that budget is everything. Budget is where you find the money to hire those counselors. Budget is where you decide how much money you're going to spend on the Jefferson Center. So these issues have money behind them, yet we have no leader yet. We haven't even interviewed anyone yet. We haven't even chosen the company that's going to help us go out and find those people until almost 3 months later. I don't know if this board does not understand what little confidence the community has in you right now. You probably don't want to hear that. But everybody that I talk to, there's a lot of people, they don't have much confidence in you right now. And the longer you take, the less they have. I would also like to see you take the item F on your regular agenda. The one employee that you will employ, you put at the very last item on the agenda. I would like to ask you to move that up and consider it first, please tonight. Those of us that can't stay here tonight do all the building stuff would like to at least hear the agenda item. If you decide not to, it's your prerogative. I would also like to ask this board to know until you have a superintendent in place, to have every one of your meetings out here recorded. No more agenda review in the little back room back there. Record everything so that the community knows what's going on. You made a promise to the community that this was going to be an open process and a process which you could be held accountable. So have every one of those meetings out here, record them so that they can be played on the local channel 7, whatever it is, so that the community that's not able to come out know what's going on, find out what's going on, so you can better educate them where you're at. Please make your timeline as short as possible. Get this done. Get a superintendent in place so that the issues that are facing this district